Hugs.
Welcome back to another Saturday morning of Hacker Hangouts. We're live, and thank you, Gulo. You guys don't see it, but when we're in that first minute countdown, we can hear each other, and you can't. And I think Gulo has taken it as a personal mission to throw me off 4 seconds before we start. So if you see me just laugh or just lose it on the start, it's his fault. And I feel like everyone should know it's pretty much always Gulo's fault. We're talking social engineering, and this is where it becomes such an interesting discussion, I think, because social engineering, I feel like, is at the core of just everything. We just don't call it social engineering, whether it's negotiation, whether it's negotiating to get your kids to go to bed on time. A lot of it can fall into social engineering. So probably a good part to start is what is social engineering? What is the topic? Who wants to throw out the first definition?
Harnessed sociopathy.
Wow, that clarifies it perfectly.
No, I mean it's the act of, getting people to do what you want them to do surreptitiously, I suppose. Or getting people to do something that they aren't necessarily supposed to do. Because we usually talk about social engineering in the context of getting into buildings that you're not supposed to be in, or getting someone to hand over credentials over the phone, or things like that. So it's not necessarily manipulating your boss into giving you a raise. That's not really what we're talking about. That's negotiations. But there is some crossover there where you can use rapport techniques to quote unquote manipulate people into getting them to do something. And it's kind of where I said it's like harness sociopathy, because sociopaths do this somewhat naturally.
Well, I don't think it's always malicious either. I think it can be it doesn't have to be I think it's when you use that trusted builded relationship to make them deviate from standard operating protocols is probably a way of saying it. Where getting my kids to go to bed might not be social engineering, because that's what I'm trying to talk them into doing it anyway. But to get someone to reset a password, that's going to be a deviation from their standard their standard operations, or manipulating them into doing something I don't know. What about Gator? Do you have a better definition?
So my definition of social engineering would be around leading a person to a conclusion I want them to, by asking questions, by the whole inception idea of being able to say, hey, here's a thought process I want you to work your way through and come to my end result. And when it comes to getting the kids to go to bed, hey, a book, and never split the difference. Go read a book on this, and it works on everybody. Almost.
What about you, Gulo?
Social engineering is the playing a part or doing something to convince or manipulate someone else to give or do something that they wouldn't normally do. My best example of that is I social engineer people pretty much every day, one way or another. Not going to the grocery store buck-ass naked to buy frozen pizza gives me an air of normalcy.
So the dictionary definition is, in the context of information security, the use of deception to manipulate individuals into divulging confidential or personal information that may be used for fraudulent purposes. And I don't think that's a wide enough definition. I think that's a generalization in terms of acquiring information, but it can also include, gaining access to places that you shouldn't be, which I suppose you could say is a form of acquiring information. The other definition that's kind of fun is the use of centralized planning in an attempt to manage social change and regulate the future development and behavior of a society, which is
Nobody
kind of the large definition.
No one does that.
No one does that.
I think
yeah.
Oh, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was thinking what makes social engineering, your definition made me think of like what is what's the times I've been most successful in social engineering, and it falls into like one of two categories. I think one is storytelling, when you can, especially like in the enterprise realm, like when I'm trying to social engineer a help desk, when I'm trying to social engineer a piece of information, like when that is my engagement that I'm actively doing. One is good storytelling, and I have a couple of examples I can go into. And I think the other one is heavy emotional response, where you're trying to elicit either. I don't like using like fear, but I know that one works really well, or anxiety. Like this is why like a lot of the phishing attacks are like, you're late on this payment, you need to send it now, or this major event is happening, you are in danger. Like those heavy emotions tend to drive action, and people don't make the smartest decisions when they're under stress. Gulo?
So I have to ask the question then, if social engineering is telling a story, does that mean that all the math story problems that I solved as a child was the teacher social engineering me to do an actual equation?
Yeah, totally.
Damn it.
That's we were talking before stream, right, in that entry thing where I was saying like probably the smartest form of social engineering is 90s Saturday morning cartoons that all had some form of like theme or lesson that they were trying to teach kids. And even, at the end, they would even have public service announcements like, don't do drugs, kids, join DARE. And, which, in the large scheme of things, if you think of what I just said, that first definition of social engineering, DARE is a form of that type of social engineering. It just failed miserably and caused people to do the opposite and run towards drugs.
I would say like that was that doesn't necessarily fit into the definition though, because do you need to have, we'll say, malicious intent, or like you're trying to get them to deviate from like the standard line, and I don't know if like the standard line is doing drugs.
Okay, so is it malicious intent only, or is it also malicious social engineering? So you keep talking about or social engineering your children to go to bed. I grew up poor white trash. My social engineering for my parents to make me go to bed.
Why do you have that sitting? He just held up like a wood spoon. It's just like, not the question of like, yeah, all right, your parents hit you with a wood spoon, but why is it on your desk right now?
It works as a good back scratcher.
It's like self-motivate. Like I imagine it like it's like the self-motivation of Code Better. Like, I'm thinking like medieval times, like they're whipping themselves. Gulo is like, you need to get better at coding, and just starts beating himself with it.
With a spoon. Yeah. It was a large wooden spoon, man. Like that looks like it would hurt. We're all making the presumption that they like hit his hands with the wooden spoon, but what if they just tried to feed him chocolate before bed using the wooden spoon, right? Like this would explain a lot of things about Gulo.
I wonder, like, I think like those categories I threw out there of storytelling and let's say emotional manipulation. I think those are the two categories. I think like spinning a good story is where that lets you build like way more trust a lot faster, and that trust is able to be used a lot longer with a good story, where the emotional manipulation, it's much quicker. It's a much quicker hit for a very singular action, and it doesn't really build trust. It just tries to solicit an action. I don't know if I even fit that into social engineering as much as the storytelling. Am I missing a category?
No, I think it's those two things, and I'm gonna go back to my Saturday morning cartoons comparison, because Taylor S. Said something here in chat. I think it was the billions in toys sold that was the social engineering, and yeah, a lot of these cartoons were designed this way to get you emotionally attached to them, and then sell you a toy. Like the entire goal of these cartoons was not entertainment or teaching people, it was to sell you stuff. That's the purpose of all television, is to sell you stuff. Because that's why it's built around commercials. And that is like, what an amazing form of social engineering, where you're trying to get people to purchase or consume as much as possible. and you're doing it using children's television shows. Like, it's this weird crossover between that first definition of social engineering, where you're trying to like change the behavior of society, and the personal form of social engineering, where you're trying to get somebody to divulge something or to do an action that they wouldn't otherwise do. Like, I think the Saturday morning cartoons or commercials is a blatant, everyday obvious thing that is attempting to do social engineering.
I feel
So
like there's a good opportunity right now to be like, and since you're watching right now, sponsored by our new sticker provider, get your Hacker Hangout, get your Hacker Hangout sticker
Yeah,
right
exactly.
now. Cool.
Like and
so
subscribe.
as far as
Like
commercials
and
and social
subscribe.
engineering from Saturday morning cartoons, how many kids, how many people did you know that used to run into walls trying to be the Kool-Aid man?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Are we going to
gosh.
find out that Gulo did this?
I tried to blow up the wall before I ran through it.
No, but how many kids wanted to drink Kool-Aid because Kool-Aid Man existed?
That's a good point.
I
Serious.
remember Kool-Aid was slang for drugs on the street. That's all I remember from a child.
What? There's the line which we just keep skirting. We're like, how many ways can Gulo come close to demonetization but not actually
No.
hitting it?
It's not skirting, it's kilting. Let's just get that straight right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Kilting the line.
I'm gonna start using that. All right, so to get back to the original point, was like, is storytelling a major component of it? Of course. In fact, acting is just this like active form of storytelling, and one of the things that they would tell you, like a really cool exercise in a lot of acting classes they would have you do, is actually just to like go out into a mall and come up with a character and go sit down in a bar and be that character and talk to people as if you were that character. And if you can get to the point where the average person just buys who you are, you're starting to develop this intuition for how to emulate someone you are not in a very natural manner, even down to changing your walk. And this is the whole like look like you belong thing, where it's very obvious when someone knows they don't belong somewhere and they're not practiced in looking like they belong. And that looking like they belong, head on a swivel makes it look like you have no idea where you're going, which means that you're going to raise the attention of people who are literally just there to help people figure out where they're going. But if you're walking around with a clipboard with your head down and like making notes of things, then people are just going to leave you alone. They're like, oh, he's doing a job, right? And small things like that are forms of social engineering that don't have anything to do with trying to get people to divulge stuff other than to leave you alone so that you can gather information.
Yep.
So this
So
that is a form of storytelling. So yeah, I think the core of it is a storytelling aspect.
So you've got that's a very good point. You have the people who are naturally gifted. You have the sociopaths. You have the narcissists who, yes, they probably need to practice when they're younger so that they can develop those skills. But it's something it's an innate gift that they have. And then you have people that need to purposefully practice. So if I'm going on a social engineering escapade, I'm going to sit in front of a mirror and I'm going to rehearse how I'm going to say things, the way I'm going to talk. I will walk around like the gates. I will play with the different props. So if I have a clipboard, I want to make sure that the clipboard is old and worn and the papers are kind of messed up a little bit on it, rather than a brand new clipboard with like the tag still on it and the papers are perfectly square. I'm going to adjust my writing styles, how I actually move around. I'm going to do that research and I'm going to purposefully practice each one of those things before I go. If I have a uniform, how does that uniform ride up my butt crack when I'm walking or bending over? How do I adjust? Those are all different things that people don't think about, but they're things that can actually make an impact, because if you look uncomfortable in where you're at, then everyone's going to notice.
Right. And so this kind of gets down to it. The more complex the lie, the harder it is to socially engineer people, almost, across the board, by period. So the more you can absorb whatever story it is you're telling is just reality, such that, to quote Seinfeld, it's not a lie if you believe it, Jerry. You know, if you if you go through the process of absorbing those behaviors and making them normal for yourself, they simply become normal, right? And
Yep.
then other people will look at you and just accept it as normal. And that's the ultimate goal. So that when you look at someone and you tell the big lie of I need you to let me in this door, or I need you to I need you to divulge this password or reset a password or whatever the case it is, you're able to focus on just that small lie. You know, it's a big lie, but it's one thing that you can focus on, and the rest of the stuff, when it gets challenged, is there, right?
Right.
And you're not lying, because in essence, part of you is believing that you're living truthfully under imaginary circumstances, and people will accept that reality. And this is the key. And this is the key that makes social engineering work in many regards, is that people, by and large, want to believe things that people are honest and that they're being truthful at all times, right? Innately, we want to believe those things because it makes life easier if we're able to accept people at face value. And that is what makes us all susceptible to social engineering. Even if you think you're not, you definitely are, because at least personally, I believe that's a base truth.
Yep. And I would agree with that. I think you fall into, again, that emotional manipulation and then storytelling long term. I think especially when it comes to the things you believe, like the biggest advice I give to anyone who's doing like their first social engineering call and things like that, calling into help desk, is your name. If there is, unless you need to like simulate you're calling from someone else, don't use a fake name. There's no reason for it, because you will stumble over that so many times because you know what your own name is. And if you start introducing yourself, like, and they use the name, like, oh, that one, like, so many people I've seen struggle with that one. But I think the other one is like you have to repeat in yourself, just like being in front of the camera. Like that was the first time, like when I started doing videos, it was super awkward. But you have to repeat back to yourself, like when you're doing a social engineering engagement, like be normal, like at least normal for you. Like be normal. Don't be robotic. Don't like make jokes. Like the best thing I have ever done in any of my social engineering engagements is have like jokes and funny things prepared, like talk about the weather, talk about stupid things, because that's what a normal person would do. You wouldn't call into help desk and be like, hi, my name is Bob. My birthday is this. My city I'm living in. My office is this. My social security number is blah, blah, blah. The last 4 digits of my phone number is this. Please reset my password. No one does that. No one actually wants to work during those times when they don't have their password. So they're calling into help desk to blow more time. So like some of the best times I've had is when it was like a half an hour conversation about shooting the breeze with the help desk person. And then half an hour in, I make the joke. I'm like, oh yeah, I actually like called in for like an actual thing. I'm sorry, I've wasted all your time. And they're like, oh no, that's no big deal. Like, and then I'll ask them. And I think my favorite story I ever have, I plan to make like a video on it, was I broke what I feel like is the fourth wall. And we started joking about, because I was acting as a new employee. I had done open source intelligence. I knew the employee, knew what the start date was because he advertised it on Twitter. Everyone starts work typically on a Monday, first day of the month. So like I knew what his start date was. And she made a joke like, oh yeah, you're joining the security team. This is probably a social engineering engagement. And I'm like, am I burned right now? Am I burned? Like, yeah, that's clearly that the first task they give the new employee is the social engineer, the help desk. I'm really just trying to get in and do work. I can wait for another week when I eventually can go in, but my flight's next week. And like, we broke the fourth wall. And that one, like, to me has been the coolest story. But it was like 40 minutes into the conversation by the time I actually like got to asking the real question.
It's really building rapport, right? And the interesting thing that we can use social engineering in our everyday life. The interesting part is that as part of my day job as a technical account manager, I get to do that. So I am constantly talking with the customer saying, hey, what are your issues that you need help with? There are completely legitimate ways that you can be using this in your everyday life to make things easier on yourself. It's that clear communication back with whoever you are interacting with. And if you make them, one of the things if you guys are looking for more resources to be able to get better at social engineering, Chris Hadanaki's podcast, his books are freaking amazing. But one of the things that he really drives home from his books is that make sure you're leaving the person better off than before they met you. Give them something, encouragement, give them something going on that they're going to have a positive influence moving forward. Versus, like what you were talking about, Silk, so many people go immediately to the negative. Oh, you've got to buy now because you got the next 30 seconds before the sale is off. Come on, let's go. Please, come on. Like a used car salesman.
Also,
So,
as a note about... Oh, go on.
No, go for it.
I was going to say, as a note about Chris Haganacki, have you seen that guy lately? He's
Oh
like
my God.
freaking ripped now. Like he got on the whole red team fit train. Like it is a freaking incredible transformation.
Oh yeah.
Just because like he's proud of it. He goes on Twitter. That's why I mention it. But like he's like he probably already could have beaten me up, but now he like can put me in a ball and shoot me. Like holy crap, man.
I'm actually super excited to see him at the next DEF CON. I've talked to him a number of times, and he is, oh my God, he's a wonderful human being. He's just so pleasant to talk to, and that probably comes from him being a master of social engineering.
Well, this is a good topic. This is a good topic, and then I want Gulo to talk. But like, is he social engineering, or is he just that type of awesome individual? Like we've met these individuals before. They walk into the room, they're immediately the person you want to talk to. They're friendly, they're outgoing, and even if they're not like I think most of us are mostly, we'll say, introverts, but you get into the right crowd and whatnot, you can turn it on. Like he is awesome, and I don't think he's not social engineering. That's just who he is, and it's a personality which can gain a lot of trust quickly. Gulo?
So part of Gator's point is when you leave, you want them to have a better experience by knowing or interacting with you. I don't always do that because sometimes I want them to forget that I was there. And so I'm the maintenance guy that's walking through, and they don't actually need to know that I was there or what I was working on. I'm just trying to be forgettable. But yeah, leaving somebody to where they feel better about themselves or feel better about the interaction is normally a good thing, because you can just make someone stay, just be nice. As far as like social engineering or Chris being that, like, I wouldn't say the life of the party, but somebody that you want to actually go and interact with is, I think that it may or may not be an innate ability, but there's a point in time where you do something and you can no longer turn it off. It becomes muscle memory. So with him being such a great social engineer, I'm sure that there's a point in time where he can no longer necessarily turn it off. He's not doing it maliciously, but that's just part of his personality now. I've known some very, very nice people. I try to avoid super happy people because they creep me out. But I've known some ungodly nice people. At one of my previous companies, our help desk guy that interacted with our customers was the nicest guy. I'd never seen him get mad. I never saw him get sad. No matter what idiotic thing anyone did or what they were saying to him, he was always the nicest guy, and he was genuine. The issue that I had with him was he was so nice all the time. I'm positive he was murdering babies in his basement because you can't be that good without having a very, very dark side.
I think you are biased towards your own personal isms, if you will.
I'm not necessarily a good guy. I'm kind of middle road where I go bounce back and forth between good and bad.
Nah, you're neutral.
But I also know that
it's called neutral.
I know that there's a yin and yang to things. You can't be like a complete evil person without like loving kittens or something. You can't be a super good guy without, like, I don't know, punching random people when you walk down the street.
That is so... I think that's your isms are showing. And speaking of isms, this is the translation. Someone, where was this? Social engineering. Taylor brought up a great one. I think that government, political, social engineering is a huge slice of the pie that wasn't mentioned, although it can be touchy as it works so well. I think another one we had mentioned a little bit before stream is cults. Like, I think the reason, because a lot of cults, it's based on social engineering, pyramid schemes, all of those type of like gross things, multi-layer marketing. Karen, I don't want your makeup. I don't want it for my daughter. Stop trying to sell it to me. You're not your own boss. I don't know, just Karen out there selling her own weird things. Stop it. But I think like when you look at like cults, like a lot of those ones, they're built on strong emotion. The UFO is coming. The asteroid is coming. Join, drink the Kool-Aid, or you are going to die in a burning fiery pit. Like, I think that's the strong emotion they're going to use to push the manipulation. It's not, there is some semblance, there's a story they build it on, and then they push it with emotion. And I think this is where I think like you get shorter retention, shorter trust built in that type of way versus longer term. It takes time to build trust, but I think that's where social engineering comes in, is quickly building that trust in a shortest amount of time.
Well, there's
So-
actually a really, yeah, we all have something to say on this one. I've actually watched a few documentaries recently about cults and why, how people get into them, and we have this idea that like, oh, anyone could fall into a cult, but that's not exactly true. Not anyone is susceptible to falling into a cult following. The cult leaders are often social engineering people to weed out the people who are most susceptible to this kind of manipulation and get rid of the ones who are not, as fast as possible, and hone in on the people who are susceptible because they have personal life instability, and this person is offering them some level of structure that will help them escape that instability, something like that. And it's really fascinating because it is kind of an extreme form of social engineering, in the sense that you have these people who are obsessed with power and want this cult following. And so they, like you said, they build this story, and part of that story is, and if you come with me, your life will be better. So you see the same type of tactics in multi-level marketing as well, which in my opinion is just another form of cult. But yeah, no, it's quite fascinating.
So I've actually traveled the world studying. I'll continue to use the word cult.
How many
And
cults have
I've
you
actually-
started, Gulo? Just as a random aside.
I have only helped start one cult, actually. Only one.
I didn't keep going. You
I-
traveled the world.
So so I've actually belonged to a handful of cults, and it was more along the lines of actually studying how the cult functioned and how it worked. And I was never really in any danger, I don't think. Anyways, so it was generally the way that I found in my younger years that people joined cults were through their children. And you would have usually some set of parents that are like, hey, we're going to start doing these things. And then they convince their children to do them. And then they train their children in the ways of the cult and basically in social engineering. And they start building that base up where now their kids are semi-popular because they have confidence, because they believe in X, Y, and Z. And then they start convincing other children at their schools, at the playground, at whatever, about what they're doing. And then those children convince other children, and then they start convincing their parents, and they start building upon that. So using children as a manipulation mechanism to start bringing people together. I remember we used to set up resorts. We'd set up vacations. And we're like, hey, we're going to go do this. And the cult is actually paying for the cabins out in Timbuktu. And the parents are welcome to join. And then it becomes an indoctrination. And they start setting up all of these different activities that you can partake in. And you start to believe in the people around you. You build the community. And then you slowly start layering on all the cult things on top of that. And people are like, oh shit, now I belong to a cult. Oh, it's too late now. I might as well keep going. And it's a slow indoctrination. It's the same thing. Like if I were to open up a bar, if I opened up a bar, I don't necessarily want drug dealers in my bar. But if I let one drug dealer in, then they're eventually going to bring their friends, and then they're going to bring their friends, and then my regulars are going to start to disappear because now I'm the drug bar. And
Oh Jesus!
I'm just
Oh,
we're
no!
going down this
How did we
path
get
of-
here?
I know I'm thinking here, I'm like, I can probably just cut this entire clip out and just title it How to Start a Cult, and we'll be great. Like that there, oh gosh. There's no way this is monetized at this point. I love you guys so much. Taylor,
should
I am
know
not
better
touching
than to
that
bring me
comment
up.
with a 10-foot pole.
you guys should know better than to bring me on stream by this point.
So it all
Gator, you
leads
had
back
something?
to Kool-Aid is what it comes down to. It all leads back to Kool-Aid. What's your flavor of Kool-Aid? And everybody wants to be able to jump through walls and go, oh yeah. What's the next subject that we want to go with?
If it's
Oh.
really
Resources
good
for
Kool-Aid,
studying.
you think you can. Those hallucinations make those walls look transparent.
Oh my gosh. I think one of the things you had talked about is one, oh goodness, I'm gonna try and bridge this, which is going from using children to gain trust. One of the weird ones, I think it's happened. I think COVID has contributed to this, but I've only had one opportunity to use it, but it worked really, really well, especially because I have this set up. I had to get rid of, I had to make sure the camera was moved so I didn't have this stuff. So I just like had it more like here so that the background wasn't there. But I used video, and that one was awesome because immediately, like when you can see someone, you intrinsically trust them a lot more. So we started off on a phone call, and I said, hey, they go, oh, well, we use Slack internally, which I had already known. I'm like, oh, well, I don't have a Slack account yet, but I have a Google account. Can we do that? Because they were set up on Google Apps too. They're like, oh, yeah, let me send out a meeting invite. I go, oh, my corporate email, I haven't been able to get in, blah, blah, blah. And we did a Google Meet. And it was awesome because the first 20 minutes of the conversation, we talked about, oh, my camera setup. I didn't out flat told me I have a I have a YouTube channel. I like dumped information under someone else's name type of thing. But having the video chat immediately made them trust me so much more because who's going to lie to someone else straight in their face the first time they meet them? And this goes back to like Gowrie said, is like, this is something we've noticed is like, we want to trust people. Like there's no reason to suspect someone's lying to you right when they meet you, especially when they're being warm and friendly. And this is the part which becomes kind of terrifying because help desk, their goal, it's in the name. It's help desk. Their goal is to help people. And they're not supposed to be a stick in their mud. They're not supposed to be not helping people. When someone calls in, they're supposed to help them. And this is where the two things become in conflict. One, you're saying you need to trust, but verify. You need to make sure you confirm their identity before doing anything. But here's the problem. When their manager or the CIO or anyone in a high-level authority calls in and the help desk goes, yeah, I'm going to need your credential. And they're like, I don't have that credential. And they piss that person off by following the procedure. Their job is at risk. And this is where then you have to start trusting your manager of your help desk to actually be the defense for you. And you don't see that too much in the industry, which is kind of frustrating and terrifying. So that was a random launch off. One was using video is a great form of social engineering. And two is like there's this whole problem within help desk.
So you mentioned children and kids, and we've talked about this in the past, but
No,
you
we're not.
have kids, Silk. Gator has kids. If you have cute kids, and I have not seen your kids because it's probably best that way, but if you have cute kids, giving them a clipboard where they walk up to a random person and they're like, I'm doing a survey, mister. Can you tell me the street that you grew up on? And then they write down in crayon the street that they grew up on. They just start asking a whole bunch of people in the area, and people are going to be like, oh, they're so cute. I will tell them anything.
You know what would be the most effective social engineering exercise to gather information about a company? Send your daughter in a Girl Scout uniform to sell cookies and have her ask as many questions as possible. People will answer them. Like,
what's better than that? Can we do that and also just give them a bunch of drives and USB drives and have them drop them in the cookies? Like, The worst part is I'm thinking I have an assessment which we should be doing later this year on USB drops, like where it's actually like physical things they want to do as part of compliance. Yeah. And immediately I'm like, I wonder if I can get them to A, do a video, and B, pay for my daughter to fly with me, because I love this idea. Like, I legitimately am sitting here going like, this is diabolical and it's so good.
But the thing is that so many hidden camera shows have done this in the past to get people to do all kinds of things, right? Like it's not anything new under the sun. This is like a well-known thing.
I personally wouldn't add USB drives to Girl Scout cookies. I would add QR codes to the Girl Scout cookies, because that seems more of like a Girl Scout-esque thing to do, is open up the box, drop in a QR code, reseal the box, and then sell that.
No, even worse. Like you wanna like put a QR code, make your own Girl Scout cookie boxes, put a QR code on the outside that links to a malicious app on the store that lets you order them to have them delivered. And there you go, free credit card numbers. Like
I have a story with this where I did something bad. I'm going to try to do this without naming a company, but there were some protein bars, and one of the engineers that I worked with,
were they powerful bars?
They were powerful bars. And one of the engineers that I worked with, his wife was like a biology. They basically helped come up with the formula and then tracked any bacteria or anything else that was in there. And he used to bring in samples all the time. He had a little basket on his desk of sample protein bars that people could just walk by and eat. And I kept telling everyone in the company, we need to quit eating those. These are experimental. They're wanting to see if people will die at the office. And he kept arguing. So one day I went out and I printed out new QR codes, and I cut them out on the label printer, and then I pasted them when he was at lunch over every single one of those protein bars that was in his basket. And when he came back from lunch, I pulled up one of the bars and I scanned the QR code, and I'm like, I told you. And it said something along the lines of, not for human consumption, prototype, do not feed to animals. It had a whole warning thing. I'm like, dude, what the hell? And he scanned it on his phone, and then he called his wife. And then his wife may or may not have actually shut down the assembly line, because those weren't actual prototype bars, because everyone panicked.
Now the question is, are we being socially engineered by Gulo right now, and him telling a really good story, or
this is Gulo? Yeah. I'm sure. The amazing thing is, you've been with him at DEF CON. You see what goes on. You know this is real.
So this is one of the things, like, we're positing. Obviously, of course, don't go out and do these things. Like, some of these forms of social engineering are incredibly unethical in many regards, especially teaching kids to manipulate others. Taylor actually said, remember National Treasure, where they were paying a kid to go in and like read things off the stuff? Kids are horrible liars. They really are. They're terrible liars. You can always tell when they're lying. So like they
it's too much detail. That's what it is. Did you spill the paint downstairs? No, I did not spill the blue paint at the bottom of the stairs 1 foot over from the corner in that spot. You didn't do it? No, the blue paint, the finger paint brand craft is definitely not mine. And you're like, there was way too many words for really what could have amounted to the answer no.
Nope. It's like walking in on a puppy that dug through the trash, and they still have the head of the trash on, or the lid of the trash on their head, and they look at you like, "What? Wasn't me."
Yeah, and I think the simplest, and then I'll go to Kulo because I know you're trying to cut in, is I think usually when I've been doing the engagements, is the simpler ones are the better, because they're the ones, it's the most natural. If you're calling into a help desk, they ask, oh, well, do you have, like, I don't have my password. Oh, why don't you have your password? Well, because my password manager was locked out and I remembered the password and my two-factor isn't failing. It's like, no, I don't have my password because legitimately I've used this one because I can't find the sticky I put underneath my keyboard. Like, legitimately, I have used that and it's worked, which is, what's your password? Well, I can't find the sticky note I wrote it on. And they go, and immediately, what's the help desk doing? They're like, this person's an idiot, but they're going, I can help this idiot get into their computer. And that's like, what emotion do I want to invoke in this person to get them to help me? And again, a lot of social engineering, I feel, is emotional manipulation. How can I get them to trust me? Do I want them to think I'm an idiot? Do I want them to think I know what I'm doing? And it changes depending on what story you're doing.
So getting back to what you were saying before with video being really effective, it's actually pretty simple as to why that is the case. And any person who's been in sales for any amount of time would know this. Eye contact, right? When you have eyes, it is much more difficult to, put stress on someone, right? If you have a disembodied voice that you're talking to over the phone, you can act or do whatever you want, laugh in the background, put yourself on mute. But if you are, looking someone in the face, you can't have those like that internal monologue and hide it from them without eliciting a reaction from them, because we pick up on so much from body language and so much from facial expressions. But when you have those eyes in front of you and you're maintaining eye contact, it does things to people. And even in a sales sense, given your elevator pitch, one of the things they teach you is snag eye contact and then direct their eyes to where you want them to look if you're doing some kind of presentation, because that will drive engagement in many ways. And that's why it is effective. So if you can put your eye, like if you can get them on video, it becomes much more effective to express like, well, this is really urgent, blah blah. But if you oversell the urgency, they're going to be like, this is weird. What is this guy doing? Right? Like he seems a little too aggressive.
And most employees don't aggressively want to get back to work. I want to get my password reset because I guess I have to go back to work. I'm never excited about calling me like, I need my password right now because I have this project. It's like, no, I don't really want. And again, this is like one of those weird engagement things, which has been, I don't really want to go back to work. So I was hesitant to even call help desk, but I guess I should get my password reset because I should probably work today. Like that's the attitude a normal person has. No one actually wants to write the 15-page thesis that they've been like pushing off for 3 weeks. Kulo.
So you can actually inflate this urgency thing though. You don't have to go in there and be like, hey, you take your time. I'm not worried about going back to work. You can literally, and once about, I don't know why I'm stuck on using your kids as props, but you could have like one of your kids in the background that plugs in like an incense burner or something that starts creating smoke, and they run up to you and you're like, Daddy, look what I did. And you turn around and you're like, oh God, there's a fire. I need my password. Start pulling out your hair, tugging on your beard, picking up the kid like, oh my God, I don't know what, I have to get this done. I have to get that done. And you can actually invoke that stress response, and people are like, oh shit, that dude's falling apart. I have to help him, and I have to help him now.
What's better about that too is you're actually giving them a positive experience, because when they eventually hang up, they're going to turn to their coworker and be like, you got to hear this shit that just happened.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. So going back to like the sales side of the house and making sure that one of the things that I was taught growing up was that if you can get the customer to pet the product, you can talk to them, you can be interactive with them, you can answer any of the questions that they have. As soon as they get hands-on, the sale's over, because once they've pet it, it is theirs. What do you pet that you don't own?
I'm going to let Gulo answer this question. Gulo, what is it that you pet that you don't own?
I have so many comments, and I think that you guys would get mad if I said any of them.
I pet a lot of other people's dogs because they're the best, and they're all good boys and girls.
Okay. But you're now absolutely attached to the dog, right? Because you went through the motion of petting. So,
but I'm attached to every dog because they're so good. I just got a new puppy, everyone. So I'm super attached to dogs right now. He's in his crate and having a nap right now, and I'm going to go downstairs and rub his belly afterwards.
In the stream, before the stream started, he was equating putting a dog in a crate to putting a child in a crib so that they could sleep and rest.
Well,
You
I was
should
saying like,
not
oh,
have
you're
children.
fussy. I was like, you're fussy. Let's have you take a nap. And I was saying, I was like, I have heard I have heard parents talk this way about their kids before. I didn't think I would talk this way about a puppy.
Yeah, and you wait. Do you stick their nose in it for both of them, or is that just might have
No,
that one
that is
backwards?
also not a good way to train a dog. For people who are sticking their dogs' noses in things, you build negative associations with something that you want them to do somewhere else positively, and you build anxiety in that. So like you actually everything's like the funny thing is positive emotions, whether it's a dog that you're trying to train or humans, positive emotions are almost always more effective. Always more effective than negative emotions. It depending on the person, obviously, but it's always more effective, which is why the modern way of training a dog is purely through positive interaction. There is no admonishment because you want them to seek that.
And what's
Positive
interesting about this? Oh, go on, Guo.
positive emotions are what you use for the quick interactions. Negative emotions are what you use if you want somebody to remember something. So
So,
you're going to remember negative things more often than you'll probably remember positive things. But for normal social engineering things, unless it's a very, very long con, sticking to positive emotions is generally going to be your best bet.
you know what? Good segue here because there's a couple things we can unravel here. First is I agree in some sense and I absolutely disagree in another sense. I do think negative emotions and negative thoughts stick in your head so much more than positive ones because I think as humans it's easy to perseverate, to hate yourself. Like we want to hate ourselves more than we want to love ourselves. I know that's maybe we'll say like self-reflection. The images I'm getting right now in chat are amazing. What's interesting right now though is I think those negative emotions you stick with you a lot more. And what ends up happening is they stick in your head. It happens within like when you get something negative happens, it sticks in your head and you hold on to it. I don't think though that's the best way for social engineering. I think that's like an old information security thing. Like FUD. I think FUD was effective at selling for a very long time. Like John McAfee has done kind of like pioneered that whole sense of FUD and fear and uncertainty and doubt, and this negative manipulation through social engineering was an old way of doing it. I think we have moved where the much better way of doing it is positive, is leaving that, just like Chris Hagnacki says, is like leaving them in a better state than when you left them, because that's what they're gonna forget you a lot faster. So when you do a positive social engineering, they forget you a lot faster. Gulo?
Yes, I agree with that. That's why I'm saying negative would be for a longer con. Positive is for most social engineering activities. But you bring up FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubts, and you said that we've moved away from that. And I would agree we moved away from that, but I think we moved towards FOMO, fear of missing out.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
because of that, it's the same feelings, it's the same mechanism. We're just calling it something different and applying a certain twist to it. And now FOMO is the big, huge thing
Oh,
that everyone's worried about.
I mean, FOMO is still it's fear of missing out. So it's still a manipulation by fear, and that takes, it's just a different form of using it as opposed to the idea of having what is it, tough power, where you're threatening someone and that instills fear in them and that gets people to stay at their jobs. For example, you're just like, well, if you quit, you're never going to get hired anywhere else, or you're not going to get as good a job, or think of all the benefits you're giving up. That's a form of fear to elicit a reaction out of someone. But then the FOMO is the like, well, if you don't take this now, you're going to miss out on the sale. The sale's only lasting for another hour, and if you don't take it now, you're not going to save all this money. You're actually going to spend more money. It's two forms of using the same fear, right? Or
Yep.
two different forms of fear that is being leveraged.
Yeah, it goes back to a cult. we're going to go out and we're going to have this barbecue and we're going to do these things and we're going to have this type of food and blah, blah. And you set up all of these things and you make it sound like it's some panacea that everyone must go to. And you're like, are you going to be there? And then people are like, oh, is such and such going? And they're like, oh, of course this person's going and everyone's going to be there. You should be there. Like, oh, I have other plans, but I really, really want to be there. And then they start to cancel things and they start to cancel out parts of their lives, friends and family, that may convince them that they're part of a cult because now they were FOMO. They were fear of missing out of something that was going to be extravagant, something that was going to be fun. And now they're like, I need to cancel these plans. I need to do these things. And it's the same thing with conferences. It's the same thing with college courses. If you don't go out and get your degrees, then you're not going to get a proper job. There's a lot of it out there, and it continues down the same path.
Is there a cult of DEF CON? Did we just say conferences?
That's something a cult of dead cow. What?
Yeah. I'm gonna start a new cult. Silk, do you have the picture up?
Yeah, I can grab that one.
Yeah, grab that picture. We'll start a new cult. Cameron Batco asked, "What's my puppy's name?" My puppy's name, and we'll pull up a picture of him. Is let's see if Silk's moving slow.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. There's Doggo.
His name is Sir Pumbaa, S-E-R, Sir Pumbaa, and he's my boy. We've had him a week, and he is so ridiculously photogenic. Look at that puppy. He's a Briard, and he's going to be 80 to 90 pounds when he's fully grown. He's going to be a big boy.
It's going to be nice, huge dog.
Who wants to be in the cult of Pumbaa?
And this is once again social engineering with cute puppies of, come watch our stream. We have puppies.
We went away from the cookies straight to the puppies. I love it.
We've covered young kids, puppies, cookies. Let's shift to TikTok because that's clearly the next. No, there's no transition here.
No, there absolutely is a transition here, Silk. And
you want to try it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because our attention span has gotten so small on having to go through, and how many people get onto Shorts or TikTok and just go to the next video and then go to the next video. And when we're talking about social engineering and or being able to manipulate getting that dopamine hit, man, it is right there ready for you. And whether you're trying to spread a different message or a different view on something, that is absolutely freaking effective. And I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, it's a huge form of social engineering. Are you kidding me? Like all you have to go do is go back to what happened with Facebook and the angry them ranking angry React posts higher than other ones. Like that is just a blatant form of social engineering where you're trying to get whatever drives the most engagement to you without any regard for what that is going to actually elicit from people. And the same thing is true of this like rapid dopamine hit. We know that games are built this way now too. Like what was it, like the gotcha box games that are designed to just be loot boxes and a form of gambling with functionally NFTs that are worth nothing, but they're just draining your wallet in exchange for nothings, because why buy something when you can have a nothing? But yeah, no, it's absolutely a form of social engineering. And I think it's incredibly unethical. I think many forms of social media are just various forms of unethical social experiments, in my opinion.
Gowrie, we're on a stream on social media. Shh.
Yeah, I mean, if you're engaging in this conversation with us in chat today, just know that you're being manipulated by us.
Well, this goes back to the definition, though. It's like I think with a like social engineering is manipulating someone to get something. Like, I'll be honest, I'm already getting everything I want on this stream because we've talked about this before. This is a shameless way to just hang out with everyone. So I guess that's kind of what I'm getting with it. But I think social engineering is towards some sort of unethical behavior. And I think that's the differentiator, is it needs to be towards unethical behavior, because like things like normal sales and normal marketing and that, I don't know if it might be unethical marketing, but I don't think it's social engineering because it doesn't deviate from like what they're very clearly trying to get you to do. TikTok's algorithm, YouTube's algorithm is made to keep you on the platform as long as it can to match the individual with the content they're looking to search. This video is not going to go out, or this stream is not going to go out to people who are looking at puppies. As many times as we put Pumbaa up here, Sir Pumbaa, it doesn't really matter. It's never going to go out to the people who want to watch puppies because YouTube is trying to match that content to them. And I don't think that's a form of social engineering. It's unethical maybe, but...
Okay, you have children, and you've done
You keep mentioning this, and this is making me uncomfortable. You're like, by the way, you have children. I've heard it like 3 times, and each time I'm like, oh gosh, what is about to happen?
This one's not... Okay, this one might be bad. So you have children and you do social engineering. You actually do security, and you've done social engineering engagements. You know how to social engineer. My question to you is, when you use those skills on your children to help them so they don't get hurt, so that they're safe, so that they don't get sick or do something dumb, you're using those same skills. Is that still considered social engineering? I would argue yes, because social engineering to me is a skill set, and what I use it towards is immaterial.
I think go on, and then I'll answer.
I was gonna say, you use those same skills on so many other parts of your life. Once you've learned it, I think you can apply it anywhere, to be honest with you. So I would categorize it as a yes, but what's your guys' thoughts?
So I absolutely disagree on a very deep level, and there's a couple different reasons for this. I have always had my personality has always been very similar to how it is now. Well, obviously it's changed, but my point is like I've always loved talking with people. Again, I can't go out in a crowd and be like energized the whole time. I'm very much introverted. But there's certain people I just absolutely love, and I can't wait to talk to them. I had like at DEF CON, let's bring this one up, is I had someone like one of my favorite moments from DEF CON 2029 was when someone just walked up to me and you're like, "You're Silk, you're on Silk's channel." Like that was amazing, and that was like an incredible interaction. And I got to talk with them, and I got to interact, and we exchanged information. And I got his email and things like that. It was awesome. It wasn't social engineering. Like my personality, like you want to know the best tip for social engineering, don't be a dick. Like that's the biggest tip you can have. Like probably shouldn't have used the phrasing there. That's the biggest tip. Don't be a dick. Like you can legitimately get so far in life and in social engineering by not being a douche canoe. That's like the biggest tip I can offer with social engineering. It's not social engineering if you're just nice to people. Yeah, so you're nice to people. You're maybe get more from them, but it's not social engineering. Social engineering, in my mind, is very distinctly, I am driving towards a specific unethical purpose, and I think that is it.
I'm gonna disagree very mildly with you, Silk, but also disagree largely with Gulo here. The reason why getting your kids to go to bed or getting your kids to do their homework or getting your kids into good study habits or whatever is the reason why it's not social engineering in the sense of information security is that you're not trying to acquire something. You're trying to instill a positive thing into someone else. Maybe you get a benefit out of that, but you're trying to instill a positive growth aspect in another person, which is fundamentally different than I'm trying to acquire somebody's password or I'm trying to acquire access, right? It may be a meta difference. Or I'm failing to find the word to describe this. It may be like an ideological difference in some sense, but really there is a break there where you're trying to do something positive for somebody else as opposed to get relief from like a crying baby or something like that. Because like in essence, like if you're trying to, like if your kid's crying, you're not going to get them to stop because you're annoyed by their crying. You want them to stop because they're in distress, but also because you're annoyed that they're crying, right? Like you get that secondary effect, but you want to resolve the stress first because hopefully you care about them.
But where
So
did you disagree with me? Because I agreed with everything you just said.
Um, I lost my train of thought. There was a mild disagreement with nope, that train has sailed. I forget there was something I
that
mildly
trains.
disagree with, but yeah.
Gulo.
So you're talking about. You keep saying malicious. You keep saying that social engineering can only be used for malicious gains, and I don't necessarily think that's true. Um, I think that it becomes Silk is a super nice guy. If you've never met Silk before in real life, Silk is super nice. He's super cool to hang out with, and he's very, very brave in a lot of different aspects. That if you ever play chicken with him, bad things happen that are just epic.
No, everyone
But
wins.
everyone wins. Spectators, people competing, everyone wins. It's great. But it's to me, social engineering becomes muscle memory. After a certain amount of time, if there's something that I want, whether it's malicious, whether it's positive, I will, and this may be a narcissist, this may be the sociopath in me, I will manipulate people or things to, well, bend to my will, if for lack of a better term, so that they experience or they do things that I want them to do. And it may or may not be malicious. I may want someone to be happy. They may be sad. So I may go in there and just be off the wall, batshit crazy, and they can't help but laugh. And to me, that's a form of social engineering, and it becomes muscle memory. I trained in martial arts for decades. If I got into a fight, I may not specifically want to hit someone, but my muscle memory will take over at a certain point and I will hit someone whether I wanted to or not. And I think social engineering somewhere kind of in there. I think it's in a gray area of if I know how to do it and I'm very practiced at it, I will probably engage in those same tactics. The outcome is immaterial to me, but the fact that I'm using the same skills for whatever the outcome is means that's social engineering.
So I'm gonna disagree with you vehemently, because I think there's a language problem here, right? Because uh, you have to define under your definition what is not social engineering, and I think under your definition, everything is social engineering, right? And I don't think I don't think in that case social engineering is a useful term, right? So we have to define social engineering in a more constrained way, because otherwise someone walks up to you and goes, "Oh, you're trying to social engineer me." And it's just like, "Well, what does that mean? What do you like, what is your definition of it? What is it?" So like in the common parlance, social engineering is the acquisition of information, you know, that you couldn't otherwise get access to, whether that's to get somebody to divulge or let somebody, enable access into a system or enable access into a building, through the human factor, because you're exploiting the social aspect of our lives. I don't
So,
think you can say everything is social engineering, because then social engineering isn't a useful term.
And the one thing
so
I'll add there is I don't think it doesn't need to be unethical. It doesn't need to be malicious. Because like sales, negotiation, I would actually think is a form of social engineering. But
Yeah.
it is using trust to gain information you otherwise wouldn't have for a very specific means. I mean, it becomes a little squishy there.
Let me clarify one thing. I don't think sales is a form of social engineering. I think you can employ social engineering in sales to acquire information or reactions that are beneficial to you, right? But sales by itself is not necessarily social engineering.
I
And this is where I think
completely,
it's
I would
very
agree with that.
explicit. Yeah, I think you have to be very explicit about this. You employ social engineering methods in various areas of your life, but that doesn't necessarily make what you're doing the common understanding of what social engineering is in terms of information security. I know that's like really meta to talk about, but I don't think calling everything social engineering is a useful thing.
so
I agree with that definition, Gulo.
I agree with what you just said because Sales isn't necessarily social engineering, but you can employ social engineering for it. Everything may not be social engineering, but you can employ social engineering towards it. Social engineering is a tool. Now, you also said that you disagreed because everything's not social engineering. And I kind of disagree with that because the argument you had is that I wasn't properly defining social engineering, which is probably true, but it's the same thing for security. I can say I work in security, but I then have to drill down and actually explain what type of security I do, whether it's physical, pen testing, reverse it. There's a whole everything that's associated with it. And when I talk about social engineering, what kind of social engineering are you doing? Social engineering to gain access to a building is kind of different than social engineering to get somebody's social security number. And it's how you approach the problem and the tools that you employ. And I think social engineering is a tool and not necessarily like the outcome, which is what is the point that I'm trying to make of you can social engineer for any situation because social engineering is a tool and security like everything is a tool and then the outcome is kind of immaterial.
Right. My point though is that if we're going to talk about what social engineering is or how to engage in it in the context of information security, you have to have a base understanding of what that means. It can't just be like, oh, everything is social engineering. We can say that, oh, this is what we're talking about. Social engineering, we commonly understand to mean gaining access and all of those things. Or if you want the government side of things, HUD putting in place programs to enable people to access cheap housing enables that area to lift up its economics. But there's a social engineering aspect where you don't know how people are going to exploit that system. So you actually cause different behaviors in people. It's a very similar concept, right? Like it's just a structure is in place to do it versus an individual interacting with another individual. And yeah, I mean, so I think like my problem with the statement like everything is social engineering is I think you have to be more explicit in stating that you can leverage social engineering in your everyday life, and we often
Yeah,
do without really knowing.
Mhm.
right.
I agree with
Once you
that.
learn those,
So
yep.
we bounce back and forth between social engineering for information security. We were a security podcast for I think we're Saturday morning cartoons. But the social engineering that we were talking about in the beginning was security based. And then we went and we started talking about cults. And then cults are more of an institutionalized social engineering. And it's not necessarily at that point, if social engineering wasn't the term we used, it would probably be psychological hacks, which I also define as social engineering. But yes, there is context around what you're doing. And I completely agree with that. I just think that we can social engineer anyone or anything by just defining it as this is what I'm doing because it's a tool that you use.
I think personally, I I don't know if this is the proper term. I like social engineering, the term, to be specific to information security for gaining unauthorized access. I don't like it as this like general marketing term. I don't like it because then all of a sudden I feel like the term just loses all meaning when it's like, okay, you can use it and and I know like I've gone back and forth in this conversation, but like I don't like the idea that you can employ. I think Gowrie said it best. You can employ social engineering like the same tactics and the same thoughts and feelings in negotiation, but it's not social engineering. Social engineering, I think, where I've come to in this conversation is it has to be specific for information security to gain some level of unauthorized access as your end means. You
Maybe I
pretext
can
a call.
maybe I can put a bow on this.
Perfect.
There's a level like it's social engineering if there is dishonesty involved, and it's not if by and large the exchange is honest, right? Like I think we can probably agree with that because otherwise you're just having like a negotiation or a sales, and if you're not being dishonest, you're not really gaining anything that you would not otherwise have gained, in my opinion. Like that's where
Okay.
I think you have to have a level of dishonesty that raises to the level of manipulating someone, where I don't think sales necessarily raises to that unless you have an unethical salesman, right?
So I completely agree with that. And this isn't an argument, this isn't a counterpoint. How many honest salespeople do you know?
Oh
Because
yeah,
damn
yeah,
near every salesman that I know is
totally
out to
not the
do
point.
whatever it is that they can to manipulate whatever situation they can to make money. That's
So
they're
I
put on
just
the
want to
earth
point
to do
something out. I do want to point something out for the viewers out there. Do you like how I just manipulated everyone into agreeing with me?
I was gonna say this is a reason I'm no longer in sales. Just saying, because when you can sell a Eskimo ice, you might have to relook at your life. Just
But no,
saying.
okay, if we're going
No,
into sales here, I think this is a worthy conversation because I think that is an old way of selling. Like this goes back to the like, sell me this pen. Like it's this really weird thing because the first question this like a true good salesperson should ask, and this is like what my business partner has taught me, is it's not like, well, you need this pen because you this. It's like, do you actually want a pen? Like that should be the first question. Like selling ice to an Eskimo, that's not my right customer. I shouldn't be selling ice to an Eskimo. And that's me being an idiot as a salesperson if I'm trying to do that. Like, I don't know. This is deviating from
so
social engineering, though.
I don't know if social engineering is a tool, but the thing, Gator was a salesman. Gator is literally like the crown prince of niceties in the darknet and on this stream. He is the most pure out of all of us by a huge margin.
He
And
must
if
hate
he's talking
kittens.
about how he used to be in sales, I'm very scared. He must have been horrible at it.
Okay, so the answer to that question is I don't think so. But when it came to that home-owned business, man, you had to go through and be sociable and say, "Hey, why would you want to do a custom cabinet and countertop shop job?" Because you're talking about this; it's so much higher of a cost than what you could go get at big box store with itty bitty thin cabinet walls. And why would you? You had to learn how to give talking points and why there was a value. So did I ever get commissions for my sales? Absolutely hell no, which was probably the screwed up part. I probably should have asked for that.
All right,
But yeah, I learned for myself to where you got to own your own business at that point,
I'm
not somebody
pulling us
else.
back to social engineering because we're now going down this weird path of sales, and I have the topic to end on. I think one
This
of the problems with social engineering challenges is, so when I designed the social engineering challenges for Darknet, I purposely just didn't tell any of the targets. So the goal was for these one, like the first round of them, was you had to get your target to say a specific word, and the targets didn't know they had to say that word. So you had to just kind of like talk to them and manipulate them to get to this point of sharing their name with you or sharing a specific word or saying, I think it was like Bunny had to say the word pineapple. So like some of them are just ridiculous that you had to just get him linguistically to go here. But the hard part with the challenges with social engineering is the moment you tell someone I am social engineering you, immediately the whole interaction goes out the window.
I
Yep.
did. So Soak did a better job than I did. I did the first social engineering challenge for the darknet, and it was you had to find out what my real name was and tell me who told you that, because I there was only about a dozen people at DEF CON who knew my name. Silk was the only one to actually complete it, and he did it in a very clever way, and I really liked it. But I had people come up to me and they're like, "Hey, what's your name?" I'm like, "I
Right?
wrote this challenge. What, why are you, no, go away, learn, go to the social engineering village, sit in there for the next 3 days, and then come back. And if you ask me what my name is again, I'm going to smack you with something."
Uh,
The
with
wooden
that,
spoon.
we've covered a ton, and Gator easily needs to get back to moving. You can see his wall is completely bare, and he's
Yeah,
moving, and it's going to be amazing because he's going to have a most beautiful space. But Gator, can you start wrapping this up in a beautiful bow for us?
yes. You can learn social engineering and it can improve many parts of your life. Make sure when you utilize it that you're using it to better other people, much like what Chris Hadnacki says. And a great way to go through and do that is go love your hacker family.
I'm terrible. Let's sign off. So I'm just gonna pass along. Love your hacker family.
Psychological conditioning. It is so much fun.
With that, thank you for joining us on our Saturday morning cartoons at Hacker Hangouts. Thank you for watching. So go out, hang out with people, and it's not social engineering. Just go ahead, be nice to people. Don't be a dick, and it's not social engineering. It's just being a nice, real human being. Thank you for watching, and hack on.